fight cause I'm very nice. I practice it every night to get on this herd mic. You know I'm alert, right? You know that it ain't nothing to serve, right? And I be killing tracks to the earth like my birthright. I'm solid like sound money and you fools sound.
Welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. This is your host, MagMongoSlade. So today we got to talk about Mike and Maria, who both decided to go on Twitter and emote, as usual, about WWE and Vince McMahon. So the long and the short of it, what took place? Vince McMahon made the comment on the investor call that perhaps they can give AEW some more talent. And Maria was offended by this, and then Mike was also offended by this, and then they decided to go on Twitter and tell people how they feel. And there's a huge market of I was fired in 2020 or 2021, and now I am very angry and going to take pot shots at WWE. That's becoming a whole new cottage industry. From Sin Cara taking shots at Reginald to Mickie James with her backhanded shots to Alexa Bliss, and then of course. Nearly an hour later, it was like, oh no, I love Alexa Bliss. It's like, no. And we get it. There's all these people who have been fired within the last year or two. And it has become this very angry, bitter thing that they've got going on here. But let's get back to Mike and Maria. So this is what Maria had to say. Wow, to think of human beings as pawns on a chessboard. That must be one of the most elitist things I've heard in a while. I could never think of mothers, children, fathers, people in that way. People are people. Playing with people's lives is cruel. Someone says that, responds to her that, you're only bothered by this because it's in your industry. And she was like, I'm bothered by it in every industry that has this as their culture that they cultivate. My brother's in the military, my dad was a prison guard, my mom worked in a nursing home. I have much broader understanding than the small scope you're trying to put on me. This is a very bizarre situation because who says that they're treating people like pawns on a chessboard? Like, where did that come from? He's basically saying that, hey, if they want to sign all these guys that we're about to release, they can go ahead and do so. And then it was kind of like, well, we're not concerned about their investments in any talent. If anything, it's great for the talent because now they can jump ship and make probably a lot more money in AEW. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, for starters, weren't people complaining that Vince was hoarding talent? That they were signing big money contracts and they were hoarding talent. Now they're releasing people and folks are, how dare you treat people this way? So while Maria is what she is, it was Mike that actually got my attention because this was pretty funny. So this Mike Bennett piece turned into an anti-Vince McMahon scribe that then became a commercial for Ring of Honor. Well, it was a commercial for Ring of Honor while also being an anti-McMahon scribe. So this is what Mike Bennett had to say. I'm going to pick up my kids at daycare now. Here's the last thing I'll say. Watch all wrestling, especially Ring of Honor. Enjoy what you enjoy. I watch everything. I find plenty enjoyable at WWE. Some of my best friends still work there. However, to deny that Vince McMahon is a greedy, evil man is to live in denial. You can enjoy the WWE product and realize that Vince has become bad for wrestling. The fish rots at the head. In the past 40 years, Vince has been at the top. He fired mass amounts of people during the worst health crisis in 100 years, all to save a few $1 million. When his company was set to make record profits, many people with families and children lost their jobs that day. So Vince could become slightly more rich. To deny this is to live in delusion. He's destroyed more lives than he's helped. You can still enjoy the product and realize that the boss is a piece of shit. Instead of attacking the men and women who broke their backs for Vince to become a billionaire, maybe stand up for those talents. I promise you, Vince will still be a lousy human, but maybe you'll understand a bit better. Oh. In the meantime, support all independent wrestlers who are literally the backbone of the industry and, quote, hashtag watch ROH, the women's division and the pure division are changing the pro wrestling game. So he ended up turning this thing into a commercial for Ring of Honor. And then he complains that he's been attacked by the WWE cult. And that was the headlines that started getting floated around. Okay, now the obvious jab that you could take at Mike and Maria is that this guy came into WWE with a drug problem. They invested money into him and his wife. They had two kids while they were under WWE contract. They repeatedly complained and repeatedly moaned about wanting to be released. And, then they wouldn't release him. Then he complained he couldn't get fired when he wanted to get fired. And then they do fire him. And now he's mad that they did fire him. It's ridiculous. Okay. It's an obviously horrible situation that Mike and Maria, and people don't forget that. Right. And that was kind of the number one thing people were saying. And that's why he started saying he was attacked by the cult, because people were reminding him, like, look, you and your wife collectively spent 10 minutes on TV. The moment you got there, you got your wife pregnant and she was off TV. Then you were off TV because you were in rehab. They paid for your rehab. They paid for Maria to sit at home and do nothing. And for, I don't know what, 3 or 4 years they were under contract, Mike didn't do anything. And then he started begging for his release, and then he couldn't get his release. So that's what people were trying to tell him. Like, look, how can you sit here and say this stuff when they took care of you and didn't have to, because you weren't really you weren't a star. You weren't like a big money guy, and they still took care of you. What would you be without WWE sponsored rehab? That was kind of most of the responses. And most people weren't even protecting Vince. They didn't give a shit. It was, Mike and Maria especially were trying to game the system and had successfully gamed the system for several years before they finally got what they were actually begging for, which is to be released. But I think the bigger issue here is that there has been this, again, like I said earlier, it's become a cottage industry to hate, or to express bitterness at WWE for what happened, and not really take into account that people lost their jobs. It's like, everywhere people lost their jobs, not just in the wrestling business where all of you work for 20 minutes a week and one time a week, and that was it. There have been people who lost their everything, people who not have any income at all because of these lockdowns and everything. That wasn't Vince's fault. If Vince could have continued going on tour, even while some states were locked down, he would have done that, but he couldn't. And so it was a situation where, why is he going to continue paying people that he does not need? Now, I have other videos talking about, maybe he's gone overboard when it comes to the releases. Just like I think maybe he probably went overboard on the signing certain talents to more money and stuff like that. But you have to ask the question of, who is Mike Bennett to even make this situation here? But let's delve into one of the things that one of the issues that he talked about, where he says, he's destroyed more lives than he's helped. Like, how do we factually look at that situation? Are we taking into account the charities and all the children's things that he's done with, like Make-A-Wish and all these other organizations? Are we talking about all the wrestlers he's made millionaires? Are we taking that into account? Or are we just talking about, are we going to be one of these people who say, well, he killed the territories? Because, there's a lot more to it than Vince McMahon killed my territory. I've been reading a book called Death of the Territories by Tim Hornbaker. And you can see that a lot of the territories, man, some of that stuff was self-inflicted. A lot of it was NWA infighting too. The NWA invading their own territories. Well, I think the best way to put it would be members of the NWA were invading members of the NWA. That's a more concise way of putting it. So when people say Vince killed the territories, it's like Vince killed some territories. There were other territories that were killed by the NWA. And then there were a lot of quote unquote outlaw organizations that were also killed by the NWA. Probably far more of them were killed by the NWA, especially since the NWA started up in 1948 and was absolutely ravishing, different smaller promotions. That's why I don't have any sympathy for the NWA. That's one thing that, when I kind of get on these cornets and they be listening like, oh, Vince killed the territories and everything was so much better then. It's like, how about all these outlaw promoters who were being blackballed and some guy's house got set on fire and all these other people who were just trying to make a living in the wrestling business and the NWA forced them out. Whatever Vince McMahon did to them, they deserved it. Fuck them. Fuck a lot of them. Okay? Because they were assholes. So if they got put out of business, so what? They were trying to get, they had political monopolies in certain states and were blocking people from starting shows in those states. So like, man, fuck these guys, man. Like the NWA are not the baby faces in that situation. Vince was just the ultimate heel. And a lot of them were backstabbers in the first place. They were backstabbing each other. You know, like that whole ordeal is a lot uglier than most people are willing to actually sit down and discuss, which I'm really glad that the Tim Hornbaker book exists. And maybe I'll just do a book report on just that book so people can realize how dirty it was. And it wasn't just Vince that was, you know, stabbing people in the back. He stabbed Stu Hart in the back. You're like, yeah, he did. He did do that. That was a fact. But there was a lot more to it than that. So when you say like he's destroyed more lives than he's helped, how are we going to gauge the lives destroyed? You know, some people lost what they considered to be a dream job. That's true, you know, but most of these people were paid very well, and it was up to them, of course, to save up the money that they made and actually be able to do something else with their careers and lives, just like, you know, wrestlers tend to do. You know, when you're a wrestler, you go from one territory to another, one show to another. You have to save that money and invest it in yourself. Go to the gym, buy better gear, you know, eat better, do, you know, make sure you don't have a bunch of kids out of wedlock, all that other stuff. But if you talk about, you know, destroying lives, I don't know what that means. You know, okay, maybe we could talk about all the things that he did that were not cool. The Owen Hart thing, the Brian Pillman, the Melanie Pillman segment on Raw. I hated that. I think those two things, number one, when if you would say, you know, what is your feelings on Vince McMahon as far as how he does business? I would say the Owen Hart thing was absolutely atrocious, obviously because Owen died. I read a lot more about it than most people did. And I know that he was, you know, this whole Vince was cutting corners, and it's like, well, no, they tested that harness 3 or 4 different times before Owen got in it. If you actually did the research, and the police officers who investigated it as a crime did an actual reenactment of everything using the same harness that Owen used, they found that the most likely thing that took place is that when Owen finally got in the harness in his full outfit, that it was uncomfortable. He tried to maneuver in it and unlatched it by mistake. That's what the police who reenacted the damn crime saw that took place. Not that the harness broke. It didn't break. You know, not that the harness was too small. That wasn't the factor either. They had used sandbags that were heavier than Owen to test it. They had even used other people who were similar in size to Owen. Owen himself had used that same harness. It was the minor difference was, in all of those situations, Owen was not wearing a hood and a cape. That's the difference. And he tried to maneuver the hood and the cape. He unlatched it by mistake. That's what happened. And the Melanie Pillman thing is completely, you know, having her on TV after Brian died is absolutely, you can't make any excuses for that. That shit was ugly and was disgusting. So we can say that he's not perfect. Of course he's not perfect. But to say he's an evil man because he released people, it's like, do people think that they're promised a job forever? You know, and it's a very weird thing too, because we also heard during this same time frame of the releases that people were complaining that they even had to work during the pandemic. Don't you remember all of those people who were claiming that we were getting that the state of Florida or the county or whatever was getting calls, and people were complaining that they even had to go to work? So you had, on one hand, people who are saying, I can't believe you fired me during the pandemic. That is evil, man. And then other people like, you require me to go to work during a pandemic? That's evil, man. So it's like, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. You know what I mean? It's a fucked up situation. You know, it's so we can talk about Vince McMahon and, you know, everything. And Mike Bennett, of course, is not talking about WWE. He's just talking about Vince. And contrary, even though Vince is WWE and WWE is Vince, you're going to have to at some point come to the understanding that it's two different entities, especially as Vince gets older and gets less involved with everything. He's going to become more of his own entity, and he's just basically going to be a figurehead, which is kind of how it's almost getting there now. So it's one thing to, him to say, and that's why I kind of agree with him when he says that, there's things at WWE that I like, because there is things at WWE that I like. Vince McMahon just happens to be one of the things that I like, because he's an asshole. And he's an asshole who knows how to deal with other assholes. Like Mike, to dovetail this thing, Mike and Maria were two people who tried to get over, right? And they were continuously trying to get over, going to rehab, getting pregnant, chilling, not doing anything, being on Twitter, complaining all the time. And Vince taught them a fucking lesson. All right, you want to be dickheads, and when times are good, you want to leave. Now, we're going to kick you the fuck out. Now they're like, oh, how dare you? How dare you kick me out? It's like, well, when you asking to leave in the first place? Yeah, but that was then. That's not now. Now everybody lost their job. I want to have a job. It's like, nah, bro. You don't get to pick and choose. Get the fuck out of here. Mike Kanellis is an asshole. That's really all it boils down to. No matter, he was never going to be the star that he thinks he is. He's not going to be that star in Ring of Honor either. If I was Ring of Honor, do I want my name attached to this thing? Maybe they don't care. Maybe they don't care. But especially considering this isn't the first time. There's been a lot of cheap shots Ring of Honor has been throwing to WWE. It's been very subtle. Not like AEW where it's like overt. Impact has been doing it a lot. Ring of Honor is now doing it a lot. It's more than it used to be. That's for sure. So it's been a very weird situation here. But turning this thing into a commercial for Ring of Honor is not going to do Ring of Honor any good. Because if you really want to put over Ring of Honor by putting it over as being, support independent wrestlers, it's like, I saw the lawsuit, bro. I did. Just like I know that the bad stuff that Vince McMahon has done in the WWE, I also know Ring of Honor's dirt. You're probably not the best thing in the world, And just because wrestling journalists don't harp on it doesn't mean that it's not there. All right, there's been a lot of stuff. If you question, then you look up my videos that I did on Kelly Klein and Joey Mercury, both suing Ring of Honor. I read the documents that they produced, that those lawsuits produced. Their contracts are similar to WWE contracts. So this whole idea of, the independent contractor, which they're being sued for. There's also some sexual harassment stuff that they're being sued for. Didn't Impact have issues with sexual harassment and all that kind of stuff as well with Don Callis? Yeah. I mean, this idea that, the wrestling business is run by angels with the exception of Stanford. It's like, nah, man. Vince McMahon is an asshole in an industry of assholes. He's just the biggest one of the bunch. While you have wrestlers on Twitter constantly complaining. And that's the thing that doesn't make sense to me. Like, these people didn't want to work there anymore. So why do they care? You didn't want to work there. Why do you care? Focus on Ring of Honor. Build up Ring of Honor. Don't try to tear down WWE. So that's a bizarre thing. But let me know what you guys think. Like, share, subscribe, sponsor the channel, and I'll talk to you guys later.
Skin tone, so why attach yourself and piggyback the wealth you didn't earn or lack yourself? I'm telling you to own up to your own success and failures. It's a reason why these sleazy guys